Hello, thanks for joining me again today. Before we get started with the next chapter of Father Jay's book, let's talk a little bit about last week's chapters. Last week I read two chapters, one about Father Kern's last days and the other about life in the inner city of Detroit. In the chapter about Father Kern's last day, it was interesting because Father Jay goes into a little more description about Father Kern's last day on earth and how he believes, and others that were there believe, that Father Kern let everyone know that he had gone home. That old grandfather clock suddenly chiming when it was impossible for it to do so was definitely a sign and a miracle in my book. In the next chapter, Father Jay talks about learning to live in the inner city and how to keep Holy Trinity and the open door policy thriving, or at least surviving. If you know anything about who Damon Runyon is, it might ring a bell for you. Otherwise, I suggest you go back and listen to the previous chapters just to get a clue on what I'm talking about. This week's chapter is actually quite long, so I'm going to break it up into two separate sessions. These are personal stories of some of the people that Father Jay encountered at Holy Trinity. And I have to tell you, it's quite interesting as well as tear-jerking. I hope you enjoy it too. Chapter 8. Meet Some of Our People. Who can map out the various forces at play in one soul? The hairs of his head are easier by far to count than his feelings and the movement of his heart. St. Augustine. The clergy. Beginning in the 1950s, Father Kern was a pastor and Father Raymond Schlindker the associate pastor. Monsignor Thomas Jobs, director of the Propagation of Faith, and Father Ignatius Dugan, S.J., were in residence. Other priests residing at Holy Trinity were Father David Duncan, who was a former professor at Sacred Heart Seminary, Father Valentine Rodriguez, who was originally from Spain and taught at Marygrove College, and Father Verarde. Author's note. On this page is a picture of Most Holy Trinity Church and the rectory. Returning to the story. Then, in the 60s, Fathers David Dillon, Leonard McManaman, Michael O'Neill, and Hugh MacDonald took up residence there. It was a big rectory, and it was always full. Also residing at Holy Trinity at different times were several other Hispanic priests visiting America for various reasons. Some to learn English, others to acquire degrees at one of our universities, and still others who were simply on vacation. A story could be told about each one. I knew most of them, but some were before my time. They all had a personal history that was captivating and colorful. While in residence, each of them would help if called upon, but their service was minimal since they were actually not part of the staff. Father Ezekiel Mondragon, directly from Toluca, Mexico, was a priest who came to help at Holy Trinity and also to learn English. We spent a lot of time working together, playing racquetball and sharpening his English and my Spanish. If Father Zeke also came here to learn about life, our clients were wonderful teachers because they were actually living what most of us just read or hear about. Living on the street with no home, no car, no money, no bank accounts, no television, no radio, no closet with extra clothes, no extra pair of shoes, and no food except what they lined up to receive at a soup kitchen. The list of items we have, and they do not, is too long to include. Father Zeke, a nickname for Ezekiel, told me in his own words, "I remember the day you, Father J., invited me to clean an apartment of a handicapped lady who for a long time was confined to a wheelchair. I still have this unforgettable image of you and I entering that apartment with a terrible odor. The experience was eased because you taught me to clean the place with genuine love, straight from the heart. I then realized that Holy Trinity was open to every person in every kind of emergency situation. The conditions of the unfortunate didn't matter. They were our brothers and sisters." Father Zeke goes on to say that one of the most touching things he remembered was lunch and dinner time, when people of different walks of life, doctors, lawyers, politicians, attorneys, nuns, priests, and employees used to sit together at the table for a meal. However, what they all had in common was their deep concern for the poor and how their lives were affected and changed by the very ones they were helping. Father Ezekiel is now an American citizen and is presently pastor of Sacred Heart Parish in Imlay City, Michigan. Holy Trinity kept its identity of welcoming those that nobody else wanted because the staff rarely distinguished between clients, such as good ones or bad ones. There was very, very few exceptions in my 11 years there. Everybody felt personally welcomed. That was the underlying key that made Trinity famous. Everyone who came through the doors of Holy Trinity walked away with a gift. Yes, everyone received a gift, whether a handout or a handshake. They all walked away with something that can't be put into words. Father Dennis Dillon, S.J. God sent us every kind of personality. Some of the folks who came for help were quite unforgettable. I recall Jack Teller, one of the Knights of the Road. He was a rather tall fellow, thin for a couple of reasons, probably because of heredity and because of his many days on the streets. He was often unkempt looking, especially in the colder season when he would sleep outside all night. Father Dennis Dillon, S.J., who helped with the open door policy for nearly a year, worked with him on several occasions. He said it was easy to forget that he was actually a drifter walking the streets, particularly when Jack spoke. He had a deep, resonant voice, a quick mind, and a vast vocabulary. Something like a has-been Shakespearean actor or John Carradine from the films. He would keep Father Dillon, myself, or one of the staff members into one of his many long conversations, even after he discovered that his impressive talks got him no more money than the usual Trinity 50 cents or $1. It was always a pleasure to talk with him because he was so knowledgeable on many different topics. Jack came from a good family. One of his parents, he said, had played with the Detroit Symphony Orchestra and that he himself had gone to Harvard. Father Dillon, taken by surprise, commented that he happened to know someone who was at Harvard at the very same time. When Jack was quizzed a bit about Harvard, he easily came up with enough information to make a believer out of Father Dillon. Jack's sister had her doctorate in psychology and was a counselor in the Detroit public school system. This was verified after speaking with his sister on a number of occasions. We don't know how old Jack was, but it was clear that life on the streets was gradually killing him. He had been through several recovery programs, but none of them worked for him. He knew all the right answers, but for him, the way to get off the streets was not through the mind or right answers. Somehow, he could never make a clean break. During the warmer months, he would sleep in the open fields around Trinity so he would have more money for drink. In the winter, however, he began to feel the cold more and finally would sign his SSI check over to us so we could maintain a room for him in that single-occupancy hotel across from the Michigan Central train station. We would also put some money on deposit at the little Greasy Spoon on the hotel's first floor. So in winter, his happiness was mixed. His drinking bouts were limited, but he was at least warm and fed. Father Dillon recalls one winter day when I drove to the hotel to put down some money for his room. The manager, on receiving the money, said, "This is for your brother, Jack." Father Dillon was also tall and thin. "Yes," he said, and headed out the door to return to Holy Trinity. As Father walked with his head down, fighting the icy winds that swirled around the station, he knew why he liked Holy Trinity. It was a place where he could be treated like the people he served. He still has a pocket-sized, leather-bound King James Version of the Bible which Jack gave him. In it is the memorial card from Jack's funeral. Jack died on the streets, still unable to do or be whatever would keep him alcohol-free. Again, anyone working at Holy Trinity will agree that while taking care of the poor and homeless, we also learned great lessons. They actually taught us through their own struggles how to enable themselves to face life issues, and I am sure their issues were much more challenging. Author's note. On this page is a picture of the Christmas pageant and a picture of the Seder meal at Holy Trinity. Returning to the story. Sister Margaret Hughes. Our office staff and volunteers were incredibly gifted and cooperative, all working together. One of the sisters at the convent of Holy Trinity, Sister Margaret Hughes, IHM, was often included not only in school activities, but in general parish activities as well. The Immaculate Heart of Mary Sisters, living at Holy Trinity Convent, also offered a helping hand. It was a different style of ministry, but it was their contribution to the men and women who knocked at their back door seeking a portion of food. When they prepared dinner after school hours, they often made some peanut butter sandwiches for those who would come at mealtime politely asking, "Sister, can you spare a pork chop?" Or they would proudly remind them, "I used to be an altar boy." They settled for what they could get and always completed their requests with a thank you. Sister Marge, reflecting on those good old days, said, "In my thoughts while making the sandwiches and serving them, I recalled Jesus saying, 'When I was hungry, you gave me something to eat.' We could also add, 'There, but for the grace of God, go I.'" Each year, on the Thursday before Easter, called Holy Thursday, we recall Jesus having the Last Supper with his apostles. It was also the Passover meal, called the Seder meal, reminding us of the hardship of the Jewish people during their exodus from Egypt. We celebrated that traditional Seder meal in our cafeteria. Annie Rowland, of happy memory, along with the cafeteria crew, did the cooking. We had beef or lamb, along with the endive bitter salad, apple salad, rye Jewish crackers, and grape juice. We expressed the traditional prayers, including, "Why is this Passover night so special?" We then listened to a reading from the Old Testament, particularly from the book of Exodus. Then we added a reading from St. John's Gospel, taken from the New Testament. The theme was loving one another. Everyone was invited: parish and school staff, parishioners, children, guests, personal friends, and, as usual, our brothers and sisters who walked the streets. There was always a sense of community, that we were all one and that we were all members of God's family. This was truly a special night. Afterwards, we assembled in church for the washing of the feet and the celebration of the Mass, reminding us of the first Holy Thursday Eucharist solemnized by Jesus on the night before he died. Sister Ann Currier. The following was only one aspect of her kind of service. Sometimes the people we served turned out to be not who we thought they were. Surprises came often. Karen O'Meara was one of the ladies on the list for frequent visits because of ill health. She could not get out of bed, ever. Her body had lain in the same mattress for so many years that they were sort of inseparable. The deep impression in the middle of the bed was clear evidence. She had all the appearances of being extremely poor. She lived in a big old house near the church, one of the early homesteads she inherited, and stayed for years in the same exact corner room in the back. Sister Ann visited her often, sometimes every day. Suddenly, everything changed. One day she discussed openly her background and a major event in her life. She even revealed an undisclosed and surprising secret. Years ago, she had buried a treasure of cash in the ground. She did this out of fear. She did not want anyone to know how much money she had, not even the banks. She continued her story, relating also that she went to the Holy Land in 1950. During that time, a change came over her. Upon her return, she dug up her money and kept it in the house. Sister Ann convinced her to put her cash in a deposit box at the Federal Reserve Bank downtown Detroit. She did not immediately agree, but eventually she allowed Sister Ann to take the money for her. She asked if Sister Anne believed in God. Her reply was yes, of course. "Are you a thief?" she questioned further. "No, I am not," the nun affirmed. "I just wanted to be sure you are an honest person and not a thief. Those are my life savings." After gaining complete trust in the nun who had been voluntarily helping her for years, she agreed to have a will made out. Sister Anne found a lawyer who would come to the house and set it up. When it was completed, the elderly lady promptly tore it up. Sister Anne was disappointed and promptly told her to get her own lawyer. She did. It was the very same lawyer. Now, as for the money getting to the bank, that was another story. Incredible as it sounds, this same fearless nun, in some mysterious manner, protected by God's grace, walked from Most Holy Trinity Church about 6 long blocks in the inner city of Detroit to the Federal Reserve Bank carrying more than $100,000 in cash. When she got to the bank, she immediately asked to see the manager. They took her to a room and wanted to know what she had in mind. When she mentioned that she wanted to put $100,000 in the bank, they became suspicious, and she was instantly surrounded by guards. She said she wasn't sure whether the guards were for her protection or did they possibly think she was going to rob the bank. "Where is the money you intend to deposit?" they asked cautiously as they ushered her quietly to one of the cashier's windows. "Right here," she replied as she opened her bag and began to place many $1,000 bills and other large bills through a special cashier's window. The attendants' eyes popped out as they saw history being made before them. The manager openly professed that it was the largest deposit ever made in cash at their Federal Reserve Bank. "What exactly do you want to do with this money?" Sister responded that she wanted them to grant her 10 certificates, each one worth $10,000. This was the will and desire of Miss O'Meary, who was thought to be a pauper. It was much easier to handle 10 certificates than a large bag full of green American cash, and with each bill being a collector's item. All of the above activities came at a time when Karen O'Meary's lifespan was growing short. The will was made out as she finally brought everything out in the open. She had no living relatives that would inherit her fortune, so she gave it all to Most Holy Trinity Church, including several homes she also owned. She died peacefully, and her funeral mass, according to her request, took place at Holy Trinity. She had no idea what a blessing she was to the church. It just so happened at that time that the church was in a serious need of repairing the steeple. It became a hazard to anyone walking in the area of the church. Loose pieces began to fall. The parish staff prayed for some financial help to begin the repair work. Over $100,000 was needed. The response was quick, and it came from the most unexpected source, a woman thought to be among the poorest in the neighborhood. Holy Trinity was always full of surprises and miracles. This was one of them. The elderly lady who was always receiving became a giver that day. Thank you for listening, and please join us every Sunday for our watch party at our new premiere time of 2:30 Pacific Time as I premiere the next chapters of Father Jay's book.